Hi everybody and welcome to today's Art of Procurement podcast. I'm Philip Heitzen, the founder and managing director of Art of Procurement. Today's podcast is part of a special 2-week series. It's our second annual sponsored startup and growth series where we aim to shine a light on the early stage and growth companies who are changing the way that leading procurement teams are driving outcomes that truly align with corporate objectives. We'll ask an entrepreneur from 7 different companies questions about what gap in the market their solution addresses, how they differentiate, and what their tools look like in action. It's a great way for you to get to know those who are leading the way. And so in today's episode, I speak with Costas Xyloyiannis of HICX, and I started by asking Costas to introduce himself and to introduce HICX.
So HICX was set up in actually 2004, but we started in 2001, and the first kind of 7 years of our life as a business, it was just Novartis. So they were our first major customer. And as software engineers, so I'm a computer scientist by trade, we realized that, we didn't want to be in services. So we were doing a lot of management consulting, building customized software. And one of the tools we built there, which was called the Global Supplier Database. And that kind of planted the seed. But myself, I'm a computer scientist by background, small stint in investment banking, realized that wasn't me. And then entrepreneur, obviously management consultant, the early days of HICX, and then tech CEO, then looking to or aspiring to take the company to greatness, hopefully.
Can you explain a little bit about more about what HICX is and what you actually do today? What are your kind of key focus areas?
Yeah, so HICX today is providing a supplier experience management platform, and that's going to be something new to most. But our goal essentially is to enable large businesses to remove the friction their suppliers will face when working with them. So enable all their suppliers to do their best work, right? Setting them up for success. And the idea here is we know that there is a lot of friction and this damages the relationship. So stifles innovation, highly inefficient, a lot of cost. And it's ultimately a drag in terms of performance for the supply chain. So we're looking at, can we create this end-to-end platform, not just procurement, but looking at quality, compliance, risk, because the challenge how things have moved is it's no longer procurement touching suppliers, right? Everyone touches suppliers. And previous tools were very procurement centered, right, and oriented. And all these other functions then made it very difficult now for suppliers to operate with their customers, and expensive.
So when you talk about friction and supplier friction, what are some of the points of friction that you're trying to help them overcome?
Yeah, so I think good examples is talking to some prospects. So one customer has 21 supplier-facing systems, right? And each one of these systems has an onboarding. So the supplier has to onboard in 21 different systems. Well, wouldn't it be great to just onboard in one, which could feed the data in the right way in all the other 21? That is a big friction point. Different functions are going to communicate and hit that supplier multiple times, maybe with the same things, because different divisions don't talk to one another. That is friction for the supplier, right? They don't need to do things 10 times because you use them across 10 business unit, right? How can they do it once? So those are some simple examples.
And so for the supplier, they'll have essentially one gateway or one dashboard or one master record that proliferates then across all of your, So then that would integrate with all your internal systems that you might already have.
Correct.
When you think about those integrations, I know something that you're really passionate about at HICX is the idea of a low-code environment. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what low code is and how that how that helps you in terms of being able to integrate all these different data points and platforms together.
Yeah, low code, by the way, is key, and we stumbled upon it in the sense that we were a very small company serving very large customers, and this notion that everyone wants to buy out of the box, I never found it to be true for a large organization, because ultimately the cost to change how you work far outweighs the cost of getting someone to change their system, right? So this in the end meant you needed a huge amount of flexibility if you wanted to execute and succeed in these projects. So that's why we built the idea of low code. Is a lot of these projects fail, by the way, in the execution, because you're going to you're ingesting hundreds of thousands of records, a lot of different platforms. It's very hard on the onset of a project to know, and the customer to even know that, my requirements are not going to change. They don't know that. We don't know that. You can't penalize them for that. So you have a need for tremendous flexibility, both in terms of the workflow, and also in terms of the data model and the ability to transform it, right? But the low code here is very instrumental in supporting that execution of the project and making sure that when things come up, it is not the end of the world because someone has a different workflow. Because you need to also bear in mind these processes and even onboarding of a supplier can never fully be harmonized globally. Because some people have this view, it can't, right? You have so much variation based on what you buy, how much you spend, where are they located, lots of parameters. So hence tremendous amount of flexibility, and you always want to optimize, right? So as soon as you go live with something, particularly when you're dealing with users, suppliers, you might realize I want to relabel a field, change a field, add a field, remove a field, add a step, remove a step, right? So this is just natural things which need to happen, right? No one knows everything at the onset of a project. And in the end, we were listening to the customers and what we were seeing, and that's why we brought this to market, right? So complete self-service, the data model fully flexible, right? They don't have to go, traditionally to a database for those who are IT centric to add fields. That's all done from the UI, changing forms, changing workflows, even scripting to code things, so to speak, or light touch kind of code to, if you want to completely change things up. But the real value, by the way, we don't want to go complete low code like a Pega or ServiceNow, because we want to create an ecosystem around supplier management, right? So at least you're getting something fully templatized going out of the box, which you can change if you so desire to.
Yeah, and it sounds like if you do desire to change that, you don't need an army of resources and months of integration and implementation work to make those changes happen. It's something that is very streamlined compared to what a lot of folks might be used to in the traditional implementations of software.
Absolutely. By the way, we've had now, go lives as short as 3 months, and global go lives in tremendously complex organizations, as quick as 11 months. And here we're talking consolidating 230,000 suppliers across 600 company codes, 5 different ERPs. 11 months is a ridiculously fast time frame to do such a global project, by the way.
Now, you said at the very beginning, you kind of positioned yourself in a supplier experience management segment. I think that's something that may be new to a lot of people listening. Was I think about, how do I leverage technology and where do where do I look for kind of technology pieces that I need as part of my tech stack? Is that an area where you see has been traditionally underserved? And is that one of the reasons why you think, this could be an opportunity for you to actually make a big difference?
Yeah, so I think the gap in the market, which we eventually saw, is actually a culmination which has evolved over the last 20 years, by the way. So from when we started, but the first gap was a challenge in data that came very evident, and they had this gap whenever they wanted to do any workflow, sustainability, health and safety. If you didn't have data, you really struggled. So, that was a first kind of early on realization. Then we had this notion of SXM, by the way, and that's how supplier experience management was born. You have supplier information management, supplier relationship management, supplier quality management, supplier risk management. So it became an endless list, and we were trying to find a simple way, because sometimes you will have a best of breed system which covers that area, and that's the right way. Other times, it's not worth for a particular workflow to require a whole system. So how can you get all these customer needs to work together? There was also, conversations, as I mentioned, one customer which has 21 supplier-facing systems, and they don't want to necessarily get rid of them, right? Because best of breed is the way forward, right? You've seen a recent procurement leader survey. Then we were hearing things like, one supplier telling their customer, well, it takes us 35 people to service your account. If you want cost reduction, you've got to make it simpler for us to work with you. The Deloitte CPO survey keeps the last 3-4 years has ranked data and data integration as the number one challenge, right, consistently. So all these things
Yeah.
came together to form what we did, because what we saw was most customers were cobbling together MDM, so Master Data Management Solution, a low code, a Pega, APN, ServiceNow, and then of course having some kind of
Hmm.
procurement or sourcing suite. And this wasn't really cutting it, and they were paying a lot of money, a lot of customization. So in the end, the gap was, let's provide this missing link to enable best of breed to unify that experience. Um, and that's essentially how this was born, right? So definitely we saw a gap of all these things coming together to create this platform. And you've seen, by the way, maybe in other areas like product master data, product information management, product experience management, the same evolution happened in customers. So I think it's only rightful that a similar kind of thing is going to happen in this domain.
Yeah, it's interesting how a lot of the trends, and perhaps it's where the investment was to start with, are in domains like marketing, in product, in sales, in marketing, that now we're kind of taking those experiences and bringing them into procurement and really changing the procurement process. And things like this obviously are part of that. As you say, customer experience has been something that's been a focus a long time on the sales and marketing side and the product side. So actually looking at it as suppliers, where ultimately we all want to become customers of choice, it's helping us think differently about what it means to create a collaborative relationship with a supplier over and over, just telling them that they're important, but still making their life really difficult, even though we tell them that.
You bring up, by the way, a great point with customer of choice. That has become something which is front and center where before it wasn't, and that's maybe COVID related as well, because
Mm-hmm.
in times of constrained supply, that's where the tables were kind of shifted, right? And that's really what's happened. So we've definitely seen an acceleration, but also a realization that more value cannot just come from savings or not traditional cost savings, right? There is a floor
Mm-hmm.
to that, and it's not sustainable. So if people talk about sustainability, sometimes I want to
Yeah.
say, well, don't just talk about environmental sustainability. What about financial sustainability for your suppliers?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there has to be other levers here which people have to start pulling on. And the other analogy which we found is take employee experience, right? There was 50 years ago, you're lucky to have a job, don't complain, right? That was kind of the way it was. Fast forward today,
Mm-hmm.
everyone knows it's the war for talent, do whatever you can, great work environment, whatever they want, however they want it, because that yields the best value. Well, why are you not having that
Yeah.
same philosophy around suppliers? What's different? These are also people in general working for a particular customer. So if you can apply that same approach, and a lot of customers are seeing that, particularly in FMCG, if we can apply that same approach, we're going to create tremendous value, right, for our organization if we set up our suppliers for
Mm-hmm.
success.
So when you work with a new client for the first time, what would a pilot program look like? Do you bring in a certain categories of spend or certain locations, or how do you typically advise that new clients look at using HICX and experience the benefits of HICX for the first time?
So, HICS in itself is a transformation, by the way. It is looking at supplier experience is not necessarily something which you can do piecemeal, but there are clear starting
Mm-hmm.
points, right? At the end of the day, the first step is you have to get the data consolidated, right? And that tends to be the hardest step. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
customers will start first with that and then enable other workflows to suppliers. But typically we would do a proof of concept, right? To show that this is really easy. And
Yeah.
that actually can be done free of charge because it is low code. You can demonstrate, hey, look how easy this is, before they take the plunge. But generally, it's a transformation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
to say we're going to go category by category doesn't necessarily always work within our space. But there are entry
Right.
points of how you approach
Mm-hmm.
this.
So if anyone who's listening to this, any procurement leaders listening, and they're interested in in helping increase their the supplier experience, of going on that journey to be more of a customer of choice, and they'd like to reach out, they'd like to learn a little bit more, where would be the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so obviously company website, but they can also hit me up personally. If you search HICX and Costas, you will have a guaranteed hit. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active, and people can just feel free to reach out. And I'm equally interested to hear people's thoughts. Right, we're creating a brand new, exciting category, and we want to hear views and opinions from the rest of the community here.
Well, Costas, I'm going to include the links to your website and to your LinkedIn profile on the show notes page for today's episode. For anybody listening, you can go to artofprocurement.com/podcast. You can also search for HICX and Costas on our website, and you'll go straight to the show notes. So, Costas, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit more about what you're working on at HICX. Thanks for tuning in to this special Startup and Growth series. To listen to the entire series and for the show notes page that accompanies each episode, please go to artofprocurement.com/startup series. That's artofprocurement.com/startup